I used to work the night shift at a small hotel, and something happened about a year ago that I still think about all the time. It genuinely freaked me out so bad. To this day, I have no idea what that guy's plan was, and honestly, it still makes me feel sick when I remember how long he was there, and that I didn't even realize he wasn't supposed to be. The hotel was small, only 3 floors and maybe 40 rooms total. It wasn't a busy place. On a weeknight, we'd usually only have about 10 or 15 rooms occupied. My shift was from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. It was usually really boring and quiet, which was fine by me. I'd just sit behind the front desk, do some paperwork, sometimes check the security cameras, sometimes watch YouTube on my phone if it was completely dead. The lobby wasn't big. There was the front desk, a lounge area off to the side with some couches and a TV, and a corner with vending machines. Behind the desk was a little office with a window, so I could see the whole lobby while I sat in there. At night, the front doors locked automatically, so guests had to buzz in, and I'd hit a button under the desk to unlock them. Usually, after midnight, nothing happened except for the occasional guest coming back late. But one night, this man came in around 11 p.m. Everything about it still makes my stomach drop. He buzzed the door, and I let him in. He looked to be in his mid-40s, tall, kind of skinny, but not too thin. He was wearing jeans and a baseball cap and was carrying a backpack. He walked up to the desk and asked if we had a room for the night. I told him yes, gave him the price, and he just nodded and pulled out a credit card. I swiped it, the machine beeped like it went through, and I gave him a key card for room 214 on the 2nd floor. I remember he looked at me for a second too long before he left. He had this kind of blank expression, and his eyes stayed on me for maybe 3 or 4 seconds after I handed him the key. Then he just turned and walked toward the elevators. Nothing about it screamed dangerous right away, but it was enough to make me notice him. After that, I sat back down and scrolled on my phone for a while. Around midnight, I looked up and he was back in the lobby. He didn't come to the desk. He just walked past me and sat down on one of the couches in the lounge area. The TV wasn't on, but he just sat there, facing the dark screen. I figured maybe he couldn't sleep. Sometimes guests hang out in the lobby, so I didn't think too much of it. But after about half an hour, I realized he was literally just sitting there, doing nothing. He wasn't on his phone, he wasn't reading, he wasn't even dozing off. He was just staring straight ahead at the blank TV screen. I got up at one point to grab a water from the vending machine, and when I walked across the lobby, I felt him turn his head and watch me the entire way. I didn't look directly at him, but I could feel his eyes on me until I was back behind the desk. It gave me this really deep, uneasy feeling. Around 1 a.m., I was just bored, clicking through the hotel's reservation system on the computer. And that's when I noticed something weird. I pulled up the list of occupied rooms and saw that room 214 was listed as vacant. I muttered, "What the hell?" under my breath and double-checked. I had literally just checked this guy in 2 hours ago. I thought I must have made a mistake. So I looked at the digital check-in logs. There was nothing for him. No name, no record, nothing. Then I went into the payment transaction screen to make sure his card had gone through. It showed no payments for that night at all. I remember feeling so confused because I swore I swiped his card and it beeped like it worked. But there was nothing in the system. That's when I picked up the phone and called room 214. It rang like 10 times, but no one answered. Then I checked the key card entry log. It tells you if a key card was used to open a specific door that night. For room 214, it showed nothing. No one had entered that room. That's when the first real chill went down my spine. He never even went to the room after I gave him the key. I looked over into the lounge area, and there he was, still just sitting there, staring at the TV that wasn't on. I started to get this awful, heavy feeling in my chest. I sat there debating what to do. Part of me thought maybe the system had just glitched, but the fact that the room had no entry log and no payment made it pretty clear he was never actually checked in. I waited another 15 minutes, just watching him. Around 1:30 a.m., I finally walked over and asked if everything was okay with his room. He turned his head and looked at me with zero expression on his face and said, "Just can't sleep." Then he turned right back toward the TV. I just nodded and went back behind my desk, but my hands were shaking. Around 2 a.m., I noticed he wasn't sitting in the lounge anymore. My stomach dropped immediately because I didn't see him anywhere in the lobby. I scanned the area and then I spotted him. He was standing at the very end of the hallway by the bathrooms, half hidden in the shadows. He wasn't moving. He was just standing there. I kept glancing up, pretending to be busy on the computer. He stood there for a few minutes and then slowly walked back and sat on the couch again like nothing had happened. I called my manager at home and explained what was going on. She sounded tired and told me to just keep an eye on him and to call the police if he did anything actually threatening. I remember hanging up and thinking that it already felt threatening, but I didn't know what else to do. I pulled up the security camera feeds after that. I saw him on the first floor hallway camera. He had walked all the way down the hall, stopped at the end, stood there completely still for several minutes, and then walked back. Later, I saw him go into the stairwell on the camera and stay in there for about 10 minutes. I have no idea what he was doing in there. It became a pattern. Every time I looked up from the computer, he was in a different spot. Sometimes he was just standing near the vending machines, sometimes by the elevators. Once, he was just standing in a dark corner of the lobby where the light didn't hit well, and he was always just staring. By 3:30 a.m., I couldn't take it anymore. I called the non-emergency police line and explained that there was a man in the hotel who I didn't think was a guest and who was acting very strangely. They said they'd send a car. While I was waiting, I noticed he had moved again, this time closer to the desk. He was standing maybe 15 feet away, just watching me. He didn't blink much, and he definitely didn't say a word. He just stared with this intense, vacant look. I pretended to type something on the computer, but I was so scared I could hardly breathe. At around 3:50 a.m., the front door buzzer went off. I thought it was the cops, but it was just another guest coming back late. I let him in quickly, and the man turned his head and watched this guest walk all the way across the lobby and to the elevators. I noticed his eyes followed him the entire way. That scared me even more because it was like he was studying him, memorizing his movements. A few minutes later, the man was gone again. I frantically checked the cameras and saw him on the first floor feed. He was standing directly outside one of the guest room doors. Like, he was literally just standing there, facing the door. So that was it. I called 911. I told the dispatcher he was standing outside a guest's room and I didn't know what he was trying to do. They said officers were already on the way. I kept my eyes glued to the camera feed. He just stood at that door for about 3 full minutes, then slowly turned and walked back toward the lobby. When he came back into the lobby, he walked right up to the desk this time and leaned over the counter. He looked me right in the eyes and asked in this low, flat voice, "You got any food?" His voice was so quiet and monotone it was disturbing. I told him, my voice shaking, that there were vending machines in the corner. He gave me this small, empty smile, then walked away. I just sat there staring at the clock, begging in my head for the cops to get there. Finally, at around 4:10 a.m., 2 police officers showed up. I buzzed them in and just pointed right at the man who was back sitting on the couch. They walked over and talked to him for a few minutes. They asked for his ID and asked him questions I couldn't hear. Then one of them escorted him out. The other officer came back to the desk and told me the guy wasn't a guest at all. The credit card he gave me was stolen. He had no luggage, no reservation, nothing. He had just pretended to check in to get access to the locked building. They were charging him with trespassing and possession of a stolen credit card. After they left, I just sat there shaking until my shift was over at 6 a.m. Every time I looked at the security monitors, I expected to see him again somewhere. The part that messed me up the most was the realization. He had been inside the hotel for over 5 hours. He was wandering the halls, standing in dark stairwells, standing outside the doors of sleeping guests, and watching me from different spots all night long. And he was never, ever supposed to be there. I have no idea what his plan was, but I know it wasn't good. That was, without a doubt, the scariest night of my life. I need to talk about something that just happened to me last night. I work the overnight shift at a 24-hour gas station. I'm a 22-year-old woman, and I've been working there for just under 2 months. I work the weekend shifts, which are Thursday through Saturday. Another coworker, who I'll call Max, works the weekdays, Sunday through Wednesday. Last night, around 2:30 a.m., my coworker Max and a friend of his, who I'll call Ben, came into the station to grab some coffee and say hi. Max and his friend had taken some magic mushrooms a couple of hours before they came in. So when I saw them, they were super giggly and everything. Honestly, it was pure entertainment for me. We were just talking about random stuff when Ben mentioned that there was a car parked in the lot with its lights off but engine running, and someone was inside. He said it had been there before they even pulled in. When he asked the guy what he was doing, the guy claimed he was waiting for a DoorDash order. Normally, that wouldn't be weird at all. Dashers often wait in their cars for us to bag up orders. What was odd was that I hadn't gotten a single order in almost 2 hours. I'd been spending most of my night in the back room cleaning, away from the registers and the front doors, so I couldn't even see the parking lot. We kind of waved it off as nothing, and the 2 guys went back outside to smoke a cigar and play with Max's dog, who they had brought along. At first, I didn't think much of it, but once I was alone, I thought it was a little weird. I had no idea how long that car had been sitting out there before Max showed up. Fast forward about an hour, and they came back in to get more coffee. That's when Max told me more. He said the car was parked in a spot where, even if I was at the register, I couldn't see it because of a wall blocking the view. He told me that for the entire hour they were outside playing with his dog and smoking. The guy in the car kept switching between watching them and looking down at his phone like he was texting someone. When Ben, in his super high state, noticed this, he just walked right over to the car and asked, "What's up, man? Why are you staring at us?" At that point, the guy tried to pretend he didn't speak any English. When that didn't work, he immediately switched to English and started saying he must have had the wrong address before he literally hightailed it out of the parking lot. But the really creepy part was what Max pointed out. He said the car looked brand new and had no license plates on it at all. He also noticed there was a pile of blankets in the back seat, like enough to hide someone under. And when the guy was confronted, another car had just pulled into the lot, also with its lights off. That car also looked brand new and had no plates. And as soon as the first car sped off, the car that had just pulled in immediately followed it out. Max stuck around for another 15 minutes before they left and told me to be careful and to keep an eye out. Then, at around 6 a.m., he came back in for more coffee, and he was definitely sober by then. So we talked about it more. He said the guy was acting super suspicious the whole time, constantly checking his phone and watching them, the entrance to the lot, and the store doors. He admitted that even he was totally freaked out. Once he'd come down from his high, he wanted to come back and check on me to make sure I was okay. We both agreed that if they hadn't been there, The whole situation could have gone a number of different ways. I don't know if it was a crazy coincidence or if those two cars were planning to do something to me as soon as Max and Ben left and I was alone. I do carry a knife on me for protection, but my gut tells me that from what they described, if there were multiple people, it might not have done any good. If they hadn't been out there just messing around in the parking lot like a couple of kids, something really bad might have happened to me. I really wish I didn't have an update for you, but I do. The car came back again during my next shift. Here's how it went down. It was about 3 a.m., and I was mopping the floors when 4 guys came in to get coffee and some snacks. I was ringing them up when one of them asked if I knew anything about the car parked at the far end of the lot, just sitting there running with its lights off. I looked at him and asked, "What car?" He then told me it was what looked like a brand new Subaru with no license plates, and it looked like 2 guys were arguing in the front seats. My heart just dropped into my stomach when he said that. I told the group that a car matching that exact description had been sitting in the lot the night before. The guy who seemed to be the leader of the group told me that when they pulled in to pump gas, they noticed the car just sitting there. It was still sitting there while they filled up their truck. He said as they were walking to the door, and they passed the car because they were at the pump farthest from the store, they could hear a guy inside, not quite yelling, but talking really loud and pointing toward the store doors. When one of them started walking over to the car to ask if everything was okay, the guys in the car noticed them, threw it in reverse, and sped away. I told them I was sure it was the same car from the night before that had been acting super suspicious, and that when it was confronted then, it also panicked and left with another car following it. They seemed really alarmed and offered to hang out with me for a bit to make sure the car didn't come back. I asked if they were sure, and they said it was no problem. They stayed for about 20 minutes until we all figured I was probably in the clear. I thanked them again and let them top off their coffees for free before they headed out. Nothing else happened for the rest of my shift, but you better believe I was on high alert, especially when I had to go outside later to change the trash bags at the pumps. The scariest part to me is that I never saw this car myself, but multiple different people had to warn me about it. At first, I was hoping I was just being paranoid and it was nothing. But for the same car to show up 2 nights in a row at almost the same time and park in a blind spot, it makes me think my paranoia is totally justified. If it is, I'm just incredibly grateful that another group of people showed up so I wasn't alone if those guys had decided to come in. Thankfully, I'm off for the next few days. I can only hope that when I go back, that car is gone for good. My name is Meredith. I'm 24 years old and I work the night shift at a tiny gas station off County Road 11. You know the type of place, the kind you don't even notice unless you're almost out of gas or you're completely lost. I took the job because it was quiet, predictable. I liked that, or at least I thought I did. It all started on a Thursday, right around 1 a.m. The air outside was wet and still, and the hum of those fluorescent lights overhead had been getting under my skin my entire shift. I was just about to microwave a cinnamon roll I didn't even want when the door chimed. This man walked in. Looked to be in his mid-40s, maybe older. He was wearing a green coat, had messy hair, and his lips were so dry it looked like he hadn't smiled in years. He didn't make a beeline for the coffee or the chips like everyone else. He just stood there, near the counter, staring at me with this strange sense of familiarity. I forced a polite smile. "Hi," and he said, "You always work this late?" I blinked. Yeah, mostly." He smiled back. "I figured. I've passed through a few times, noticed it's always you." That unsettled me way more than I let on. I just shrugged it off. "Oh, yeah. Small town, you know." But he didn't leave. He said Meredith, right? I froze. I wasn't wearing a name tag. My heart just dropped. I was about to ask him how he knew my name when he pointed to the whiteboard behind me where I'd written "Cinnamon Coffee is back." "You have nice handwriting," he said. "Most people dot their I's with little circles. You use little slashes. It's very specific, thoughtful." I didn't know what to say. He didn't buy anything. He just stood there for another minute, watching me, like he was studying my reactions. Then he finally just nodded. "I'm Paul," he said. "Just curious, that's all." And then he walked out into the fog. After that, he started showing up randomly. Not every single night, not enough to scream "stalker" out loud, but often enough that I stopped thinking it was a coincidence. Sometimes he'd come inside. Other times I'd just see him sitting in his car at the far edge of the parking lot, his headlights turned off. One night I tried to just ignore him. He came in, bought a bottle of water, and lingered like he always did. "You're quieter tonight," he said. "Long shift," I muttered back. He slowly looked around the store, like he was taking inventory of everything. "It must get lonely out here. Just you, in the dark. No one else for miles." "I'm fine," I said, my voice tighter than I meant it to be. Then he leaned on the counter. "You ever get scared? Being a woman out here all alone at night?" The crazy thing was, his voice wasn't even threatening. That's what made it worse. It was just curious, neutral, like he was asking about the weather. I took a step back. "Do you need anything else?" He tilted his head. "You always keep the door to the back room locked. Smart. I noticed you check it around 2 a.m. almost every night." My stomach just turned to ice. I didn't answer. "I'll let you get back to it," he said with this soft, almost apologetic smile. "Didn't mean to make you uncomfortable." And he walked out again. After that night, I started walking to my car with my keys poking through my fingers. I kept a tire iron under the counter. I changed the curtains in my apartment. I started showering with the bathroom door locked, even when I was completely alone. There were nights he didn't come. Sometimes I'd go a whole week without seeing him, but that almost made it worse, because I never knew when he'd reappear. Like the time I came back from my 10-minute break and found a Polaroid sitting on the counter. It was a picture of me. I was out back, refilling the windshield washer fluid bin. It was taken that same night, and it was taken up close. Way too close. There was no note, but the word "windshield" on the bin's label, and the slash I used to dot the I. They were both circled in red ink. The next time he came in, I didn't let him speak. I told him to leave. I told him if he didn't, I was calling the police. Paul just nodded, all calm. "I get it. I've been too forward." "You've been following me," I said, and I hated how my voice cracked. "I just think you're the kind of person who's used to being misunderstood," he said, like it was the most normal thing in the world. "I thought maybe you'd appreciate someone who actually pays attention." "That's not paying attention. That's obsession," I shot back. He didn't even flinch. "Would it be easier if I wore a smile and bought a soda every night? Would that be more normal? If I just talked about sports and pretended I didn't notice the way your shoes are always a half size too big, or how your left eyelid twitches when you're tired?" That was it. I was already dialing 911. He didn't try to stop me. He just stood there, arms at his sides, waiting for them to show up. The police came quickly. They searched his car. They found a notepad filled with dates and times. It was my schedule. Notes about how I walked, what clothes I wore, what groceries I bought. One page. It just had my name written over and over again, in tighter and tighter loops, until it just turned into this frantic, insane scribble. He kept telling the cops the same thing. I just notice things. I'm just a curious guy. A restraining order went through that week. I don't work nights anymore. I don't even live in that town. The company transferred me to a station 2 hours away. But even now, when I'm driving home and I see headlights behind me for a little too long, I feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. And sometimes, I still think about the way he said my name. Like he already knew exactly how it would sound coming out of his mouth. Like he'd been practicing it.